What is earnest money when buying a house? How much is it? How does it work? And what's the difference between earnest money and a down payment? We're going to answer those questions in this video. Earnest money, also known as a home deposit, escrow deposit, or good faith money, is one of those terms in real estate that can be a bit puzzling, especially if you've never heard it before. In its simplest form, the term earnest money is what's given by a buyer to show that they're sincere or earnest in regards to purchasing a home. You can think of it almost like a security deposit, even though it seems pretty straightforward. Dealing with earnest money deposits, or EMD, can be a bit challenging if a deal falls apart. So if you're buying or selling a home, it's important to know the details about earnest money, because if you don't, it could cost you a lot of time, money, or both. When a seller accepts an offer from a buyer, the home is now under contract. When a home is under contract, the seller takes their home off the market and they can't accept another offer from any other buyer. But just because a home is under contract, however, does not mean the buyer will eventually buy it. The buyer still has to have the home inspection and appraisal done, which take time. Not to mention, they still need to have their loan approved if they're not paying cash. So the seller needs an incentive to take their home off the market for however long has been agreed to in the contract to have these things done, because they're going to miss out on any other offers they could have accepted during this time. And if the deal goes sideways, the seller would need to put their home back on the market and go through the whole process again with another buyer. So as you can see, if you're a seller, this is not ideal. What earnest money does is it separates the serious from the curious, because it shows the seller that you're the real deal and you're serious about buying their home. Essentially, earnest money is a form of protection or insurance that the seller is going to have to keep from getting played like a fiddle and having a buyer walk away from a transaction for any given reason. And if the buyer does decide not to purchase a home without an acceptable reason that would be predetermined in the contract, the seller would be entitled to keep the buyer's deposit. We're going to go over those acceptable reasons that would be predetermined in the contract in just a moment. Think about it. If there wasn't an earnest money deposit, as a buyer, you could enter into contract with multiple sellers at the same time, have them all take their homes off the market. They wouldn't be able to accept any other offers, and you could wait until the last minute and walk away from any or all of those homes just because you changed your mind, and there wouldn't be any negative consequences to you as a buyer. So how much earnest money is enough? Okay, usually earnest money deposits are 1 to 3% of the purchase price. And how much earnest money you should offer is going to depend on the market you're in. In a slow market, when a property's been sitting for a while, you might not need to deposit 3%. However, in a hot market where there are bidding wars and you're competing with multiple buyers, some of which might be cash buyers, it might be a good idea or strategy to go above 3% to have your offer accepted. Now, as a buyer, you should consult with your real estate agent about how much earnest money you should offer, because there can be a big difference between 1 and 3% depending on the purchase price of a home. For example, if you're buying a home for 800 grand, 1% of that amount is $8,000, while 3% would be $24,000. That's a $16,000 swing, which is nothing to sneeze at. Now keep in mind, most sellers aren't going to give as much weight to the amount of earnest money you deposit as they would other important factors like how much you're putting down and how soon you can close escrow. With that said, consult with your realtor to determine the best combination of terms to offer when you make an offer. How does earnest money work? Okay, once your offer is accepted, you're going to be required to transfer your earnest money deposit to an escrow company. An escrow company is a neutral third party that is going to hold the funds in an escrow account until the sale closes. Once the sale closes, the earnest money will then go towards the purchase price of the property or the down payment. What's the difference between earnest money and a down payment? Okay, it's common for buyers to not fully understand the difference between these two. Both the earnest money deposit and down payment are paid by the buyer, but they're not the same thing. Earnest money is a deposit or pledge made by the buyer to ensure the seller that they seriously want to purchase the home. A down payment is entirely different. A down payment is money that gets paid toward the purchase price of a home. The difference between the purchase price and the down payment is the amount that you're going to get a mortgage for. So for example, if you're buying a home for $800,000 and you're putting $100,000 down, your mortgage loan amount would be $700,000. And any earnest money deposit you've made would be applied toward your down payment on the day of closing. Now, the down payment amount you decide to go with depends on the mortgage program you're going to choose. And for more information on how much you should put down when you're buying a house, check out this video up here. So what are some reasons earnest money deposit would be returned to a buyer? Okay, the standard contract to buy a home by default has three main contingencies where the buyer would be entitled to get their earnest money back. And you can also add other contingencies that would allow you to be reimbursed your earnest money deposit as well. So for example, you might add a contingency for the sale of an existing home. In this case, if you can't complete the sale of a home you currently own before you close on the next home, you'd be entitled to get your money back. With that said, the three main contingencies that are baked into a standard purchase contract are, number one, the inspection contingency. Okay, every inspector is going to find something wrong with any home, even new construction homes. And if there are minor defects, most of the time they can be fixed. As a buyer, you can ask the seller to make minor repairs, or you can simply accept them if you don't want to mess around and go back and forth. Now, on the other hand, if the defect is big enough and the seller won't fix the issue, the expense of making the repair might be too big to justify the current price, in which case, as a seller, you're going to want to renegotiate. A few examples of this would be if there are structural problems, or if the home needs a new roof or heater, ventilation, and air conditioning system. If you can't come to an agreement with the seller in regards to the repairs within the inspection contingency timeframe, your earnest money deposit would be returned to you. The second contingency that's part of a standard contract is the appraisal contingency. If the home doesn't appraise for the agreed upon price, the lender isn't going to lend money on a home for more than the value, because if you don't make your mortgage payment and they need to unload your property, it's going to be extremely difficult for them to get their money back. Also, if the home appraises for less than the sales price as a buyer, you're not going to be too fired up about paying more for the home than it's worth in a normal market. And as a buyer though, you can always ask the seller to lower the price or maybe split the difference. It's negotiable. If you can't work something out with the seller, you'd get your money back. Now, in a hot market, people have less of a problem with paying more than what a home appraises for, and they can justify paying more than the value because of limited inventory. The reasoning behind this is, well, gosh, I love the home, and if I don't buy it for that price, someone else will, and I'm gonna miss out. In this case, as a buyer, if you want to buy it, you would need to come to the closing table with the difference between the agreed upon price, the selling price, and the appraised value, on top of your down payment and any closing costs. The third contingency built into a contract is the loan contingency. Okay, provided you're financing, the loan or mortgage contingency states that you have a certain number of days to secure your financing and remove your loan contingency. If you can't secure your financing within this specified time frame because maybe you lost your job, God forbid, you would be entitled to get your earnest money deposit back provided you have informed the seller in writing before your loan contingency expires. So what are some of the reasons a buyer might lose their earnest money deposit? One reason a buyer would lose their earnest money deposit would be if they don't respect the timelines in the contract. The contract is there for a reason. It's to ensure that people follow through on what they've said they're going to do or what they've documented they're going to do. If as a buyer you disregard the deadlines in the contract and you don't follow through on the purchase, you actually could lose your earnest money deposit. For example, if a buyer doesn't remove their inspection or appraisal contingency in time, or if they're not able to secure their financing by the due date, the seller would be able to keep a buyer's earnest money deposit. As a buyer, another reason you could lose your earnest money deposit would be if you simply change your mind and you back out on buying a home and you can't connect the decision to a contingency that's in the contract. For example, if you found a better deal, or maybe unfortunately you and your spouse have decided to file for divorce, then if you cancel escrow, the seller would be allowed to keep your earnest money. This is why it's important to be 100% sold on the home and your spouse if you're going to make an offer. So what happens if the deal cancels and there's a dispute in regards to the release of an earnest money deposit? From time to time, there will be disagreements between the buyer and the seller as to who gets the deposit when a deal falls through. The purchase of a home can be very emotional. Many times when emotion is high, logic is low. Even though it might be clear as day as to which party in the transaction the deposit should go to, sometimes there are disputes. For example, if a buyer has removed all their contingencies and they decide they want to cancel the purchase of a home because they simply changed their mind, well, it would be pretty clear that the seller would be entitled to receive the earnest money deposit. But if the buyer disagrees, the escrow company would have to hold that money in the escrow account until the buyer and the seller resolve the issue. If the issue can't be resolved between the two parties, the deposit would continue to be held in the escrow account until the dispute is settled by mediation, arbitration, or the court system. In this case, once it's been decided by the authorities as to who the money should go to, it would then be dispersed accordingly by the escrow company. Don't worry, this isn't the norm, but it can happen. And when it does happen, it's usually black and white about who the money should go to. If you're looking to buy a house and you're not sure how much you should put down, watch this video here to find out how much you really need. Chances are, if you're still watching at this point, you like videos like this. And if that's the case, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be notified when we have other videos like this become available. Thanks for watching.